when you're having that unsettling feeling, when you're feeling insecure, when you're feeling like you just don't know where your future is going within a certain role, and not even within your professional life, family life, whatever it may be, there's going to be growth there. So, and you're going to come out of it stronger. You're going to learn something that makes you that stronger person that then either makes you more successful in your current role or in your future.
Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. Have you ever wondered, who am I as a professional? Like your career identity or professional identity? Well, that's actually a real thing. When I was preparing for this episode, I found actually published journal articles on professional identity in the veterinary space. Well, interesting enough, when I went to VMX in January, I went to a talk titled Finding Your Professional Identity After Leaving Clinical Practice. And giving that talk was my guest today, Dr. Bianca Zenor. Now, Dr. Bianca earned her bachelor's, master's, and DVM all from Purdue University. She spent 7 years in small animal practice in Indiana, served as a senior manager of veterinary affairs at Hill's Pet Nutrition, and then served as director of the veterinary nursing program and clinical associate professor at, back again, Purdue University College of Veterinary Medicine. In 2020, she joined IDEXX as the director of global medical affairs, leading global teams of managers and specialists. As Bianca tells her story, you will see that life inside and outside of work impact each other. And it's beautiful. The unplanned, unexpected will happen, and it can take us down unexpected but exciting paths. And Bianca will talk about finding your professional identity even when the people around you may not understand your choices. So, on to the conversation. When did you even know you wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
So I would call myself a late bloomer. It seems like, especially when I went to vet school, a lot of the people that I talked to, they knew they wanted to go to vet school from when they were little, like 4 or 5, and they had been part of, FFA growing up and 4-H, and all that was foreign to me. So I really didn't really become interested in veterinary medicine until I had started college. And I completed my first year of college thinking that I was going to be a human doctor. And that was really what I was focused on. And so I really started shifting gears when I got into medical courses, biology and the intro courses and things, and then realized, hey, there's actually veterinarians and there's doctors for people that have pets. I was never allowed to have pets when I was growing up. I had outdoor cats, and that was pretty much it. And I don't even remember going to the veterinarian once during that time. So not to put any blame on my parents for that. It was just a different approach to things and a different way of thinking. So I really didn't know any, even to have that consideration of a career path until I got a pet my freshman year of college. So that's when it all started. And that's when I really had to shift gears. And I felt like I was a little behind on getting those animal hours and work experience hours and things. But then it became my passion.
Now, that's really interesting. So, from not even really thinking about it as a career at all to, going into veterinary medicine, when you went into vet school and you went to Purdue, did you know what you thought you might want to do after vet school, and did that change?
Yeah. So I knew right away. So the pet I got actually was a cockatiel, and I realized right away that it was really hard to find a veterinarian that knew anything about birds. So there were 2 practicing avian veterinarians in the Indianapolis area at the time, and I think still are. So, I went and I learned from them and saw all the different types of animals that came into an avian exotic practice. And that's really where my heart was, and what I wanted to do, especially because it was so difficult to find one through school. So that brought on challenges in itself, just being a vet student at a program that really didn't have any of those rotations at all. So I had to do a lot of my 4th year. I think I did 4 rotations that were completely off campus, trying to seek out the knowledge that I had so that I could be able to practice on day one. That was my goal and my dream. And first year out from graduating, that's what I did. Loved it. There were some challenges that we can talk about later, probably in this podcast, as far as being on call and the long hours and just part of the practice aspects that I struggled with. But really what shifted things and made me change was then the birth of my daughter, who was special needs and still is special needs. But she really required a lot of special care right after she was born. And that was right at a year from when I graduated. And that's what changed my career path.
And that was really early into your career. So I'm sure that really impacted, what you had to do next. So do you mind going ahead and sharing a little bit about kind of what was happening and why you decided to make your next step?
No, absolutely. So she's about to turn 21. She turns 21 on May 16th, and she has autism, and she's also very low tone. So not really, most likely, genetic for the tone issue. But when she was born, she required constant care, being on oxygen. She had a tracheostomy. She had a feeding tube. And so at that point, I really was ready to give up practicing altogether. Had to definitely take a step back and be a mother and focus on that at the time. But then as she started to improve, I had to figure out what I was going to do with my career. And you would work so hard to get to a certain point, even though very early in my career, I was thinking about leaving, just outright leaving altogether. And I don't even recall how we met, but I met a veterinarian who owned a 24-hour emergency practice at the time. And he approached me and was like, no, you can do this. We can make this work. I did want to get out of the house. And so I needed to figure out how to do that. And he provided a schedule that was, what I was able to do, where I would do the night shift and then come home, and my husband would be with my daughter at night. So it worked for us, and I was able to do that for about 4 or 5 years until I decided to change paths again.
Well, and even that seems really challenging to do nights. I personally don't do nights very well, so to me that seems extremely hard. And then again, you have a lot of roles with being a mom, a wife, and supporting your own interests. So what made you want to make another transition 4 years in? Was it that, or what other?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly what it was. I was waking up and not knowing what time of day it was and what day of the week it was. I was just tired all the time. And so the health of my daughter had improved, but then I was struggling with the going back and forth after doing it for, that 4 to 5 years. So it was really just about hours. Still loved being in practice. And so that's when I transitioned to a day practice. The exotics had really passed at that time. Really didn't focus on exotics anymore because I had shifted to mainly dog and cat emergency medicine and some exotic, emergency medicine. But went to a dog and cat day practice, so small animal practice, pretty routine. But then honestly, after you'd been in emergency and that adrenaline is going all the time and the cases are so challenging and they're just at different levels. And I don't mean that in any bad way at all when I say it that way. But going back to day practice was a shock to me as far as just the pace. And I probably, I'm a runner, constantly doing things. And that probably was just a little different to me. So going back to day practice, I didn't find as, just to me, interest-wise, it wasn't the same level. And then also, it was more challenging, though, keeping up then with my daughter's doctor's appointments and just routine childcare and the point, just having any child, special needs or not, just childcare in general as a practicing veterinarian is very difficult. So it was just a challenge overall. And then I went back to emergency medicine after that for a few years. But because of that pace again and being back to emergency medicine, same situation where I was tired all the time and couldn't keep up with things. So that's when I then really had to take a step back and say, all right, I'm at my crossroads. I think this was about year 8 after graduating. What do I do next?
And I think this is a good time maybe to go ahead and talk a little bit more about being a mom and being in the veterinary profession, I mean, we have a very heavily female dominated profession. And so I think it's extremely relevant. So for people who are probably extremely career driven, very passionate about this profession, but we also really are passionate about being moms. And, at the end of these episodes, when I ask, spoilers so you can get prepared, what people are most grateful for, it's usually people and it's our relationships. So do you mind sharing a little bit more about just what you've seen, what you've experienced when it comes to being both a mom as well as a veterinary professional?
Yeah, I think for me, and we'll probably talk about this through the professional identity piece, is a lot of it is that I think it's that those personalities that we bring into veterinary medicine, we focus so much on being that successful practicing veterinarian, as well as that successful mom that can handle everything, and realizing that it's okay and that we all parent differently and we all do things differently, and there should not be any guilt with that. I could not have done the things that I did in practice or even in my industry roles without the support of my family. Number one, that's the biggest part that I've had to have to be successful, is my husband, my mother, my mother-in-law, and helping me during those times when I really needed that care so I could sleep, so that I could take breaks, especially when I was doing the night shifts, help getting to and from doctor's appointments, and that's routine appointments for childcare, and not having that guilt of asking. And if it's paid support, whatever it is that you need for your childcare, that everyone is different and there shouldn't be guilt, even if that is decreasing your hours. I've had to decrease my hours too. I've gone to part-time. I've gone to 20 hours a week. I've done relief work so that I could be flexible in my hours. And then that way I can do weeks where it was 10 or 15 hours and weeks where it was more. So I think it's okay to be creative, look for different ways, rely on your team, your village, whatever you want to call it, and not put that pressure or guilt to be perfect. The house doesn't have to be perfect. I love it when it's perfect. I do. But it doesn't have to be perfect. Now we can do grocery delivery. Use the tools that are out there so that you don't put the pressure on yourself to do it all and be all to everyone.
I also saw a question recently on Reddit where it was a young veterinarian and she just found out she was pregnant. And so a lot of her questions were, how do I do pregnancy and continue being a vet? So and again, this can be very personal. Each pregnancy is probably a little bit different. So adjust you to the individual situation. But how was that for you? How did you balance pregnancy and your job too?
Yeah, it's been a while, but I remember definitely, I was one where I had morning sickness, not severe though, but morning sickness all the way through. And so just having to take a lot of breaks. That was one where my first employer, she was very supportive, and I was allowed to, mark myself out for an hour and take a nap, things like that. I think one of the most difficult challenges for me was being on call. We traded call every other week, and that, especially towards the end of the pregnancy, got extremely difficult. So that would be one where I would try to negotiate a little bit harder about being on call, especially overnight, and the physical demands of going in, but also then the physical demands of just needing to rest so much when you're there. So just, I think the biggest thing, don't be afraid to say what you need. You know what you need, you know how you feel, and you know what your body is telling you to do. And you're also tending and creating a new life while you're doing that. So don't be afraid to ask for what you need. And luckily, the good thing is, I think it can be good and bad. Most of us in the profession, including a lot of our, the employers, are women, and they've been through this, so they understand. They can also, it could have been a very easy pregnancy for them. And so they expect you to do more, as well. So that could be kind of the downside, but they also have all been there. And I think, can be very empathetic if you just make sure you raise your voice.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I haven't been pregnant yet, so I have nothing to offer. So thank you for sharing that. And again, listening to what seems to be and what you need at the time too. So you were talking about, getting to the point where there was no balance and define that as it makes sense to you and your point of life, but you felt like you were at the crossroads and needed to do something a little bit different. So first of all, how did you know where to look? What was your thought process in trying to navigate that?
Yeah, I had no idea. I just knew that I was, like you said, like no balance. I knew there was no balance. I was, honestly, tired all the time, struggling with my weight, with the being on, overnight shifts and things, not being able to take any time to exercise or take care of me and my wellness. So I just knew it was off. So I decided in the meantime, I was going to do relief work, and that would allow me to at least practice on my own terms and my own hours. And it was amazing. And I think people that are stepping into relief still find this when they are a little concerned about, will their calendar fill up? Yeah, your calendar fills up. There's a lot of people that need relief help. And we have a very small profession. So most likely it's going to be somebody, somebody that, was a classmate or around in those times where they knew you, and they're willing to, have you come in and do relief. So that was not a problem at all. And that was the best thing. And through that, I was able to meet a lot of different distributor representatives that I had just never met before, because a lot of the times I was in the back room and the office managers usually met with the distributor representatives, unless they came in for a lunch and learn. And being on emergency shifts, a lot of the time, there was no need to meet distributor representatives in the middle of the night. So that, just the networking aspect and meeting people, and the distributor reps knew where the jobs were in industry. And the only exposure to industry that I had or that I recalled was in vet school, when you had the food companies coming in or the pharmaceutical companies in and giving us pizza, right? So that was really all I knew, was the university relations side. But the distributor reps really helped kind of educate me on what was out there and then connect me to the right people.
And I'm assuming that's how you found the position at Hills?
Yeah. That's exactly it. So it was the distributor rep that his Hills veterinarian that he worked with routinely had moved to a different position. And so he was like, hey, I know this position's open. And it had actually been open for a few months, and they were having trouble filling it. So I don't know if that's why I got it. I'm not sure. But I was like, oh yeah, I'll definitely apply, because that was one of the good memories that I had, was the was the Hills representative when I was at Purdue. And it's so funny, because if you talk to anybody that was graduated around my time from the Midwest that are in industry, I think we all go back to him. We all are like, oh, he's why we joined industry. So he had a very positive impact. And so I was thrilled that I was introduced to that role and made the right connections and applied, and then actually got the job being it was veterinary diagnostic consultant at the time, and now they're called professional consulting veterinarians at Hills. So I was helping out the distributor sales reps and doing a lot of clinic education.
And we'll get to multiple roles that you've had, but I think this might be an okay time to pause, because again, going back to the topic of your talk on finding your professional identity after leaving clinical practice, was it at this time, like early on, where you were already kind of having to answer some of those feelings and probably questions from other people?
Yeah. So I would say at first, definitely when I was in relief, when I was doing the relief work, I was starting to doubt myself as a veterinarian, because I didn't know what was next. I almost felt like a clinic jumper, because I was going from, I started out with the exotic practice to emergency medicine to day practice to back to emergency medicine and now to relief. So basically 5 different roles in, I think, that 7 or 8 year time frame. And so I felt like I was lost. And so I was starting to doubt myself as a veterinarian at that time, even though that I knew clinically I'm practicing good medicine, and feeling good, but just doubting myself. And at first, when I was at Hills, I was really excited to be there. So that feeling kind of went away for a little bit. And I would say, though, once I got more going into the clinics and seeing people that I knew, as well as meeting new veterinarians and new team members, and then going to, the local conferences and things, that's when I really started hearing comments. I started having people say, "Oh, you went to the dark side," and "Oh, why did you decide to stop practicing?" And "Are you ever going to practice again? Or are you going to practice on weekends?" Everything kept going back to practicing or the bad of being in industry. And then so that really, just hearing those comments, we take them in and you start doubting. And that's exactly what I started doing.
So for you, did you feel shame? You started to feel shame on not being in clinic?
Yeah, I did. And I wanted to still practice on the weekends. So there was definitely financial benefit to doing that. And I practiced on the weekends for about 4 years. But it was that little bit of shame of, also being in sales and people, my perception of how they felt, salespeople are as well. So even though I know in practice, the distributor rep can be your best friend, the sales rep can be your best friend, because of all the information that they bring. But then also there's that negative, connotation to it as well. And so when I take that in, I start being very judgmental of myself. I think that's just my natural personality. So yeah, there's definitely some shame.
I feel fortunate that I did not hear those things when I went into practice, or I went into industry. So for me, I always struggle with that. I think my guess is probably they may have been hiding their own shame too. You never know. And first of all, can we say your words do impact people? So please listen to what you're saying.
Absolutely. Those jokes can be taken personally. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, any type of pivot in life, whether it's motherhood or, going to a different role. And it's interesting to hear you were already feeling that way, still working in clinic. You just going into different types of roles. So anytime we do that, we're going to have probably a little insecurity, a little of confusion, feeling a little lost. So anytime someone even remotely says something, which just continues to feed our own inner voice of doubt, that's, it's not helpful. So how did you handle that? Did you talk with people or what did you do?
Yeah. So I definitely talked to my colleagues at Hills, and I will tell you that the group of veterinarians that I met during that time period are still some of my best friends to this day. And we've kind of grown up in industry together. A lot of them have stayed in industry. Some have gone back to practice, but just we were all kind of going through at different levels, or at least they were a good ear. If they weren't going through those feelings, one of the two. And so did really talk to them about it. And it felt, you feel like, again, you form that small family unit by doing that as well. But then also this goes back to, I think, that type A personality, that perfectionist personality that's in a lot of us as veterinarians. Then, okay, I'm not going to practice anymore, but I'm going to be the best at this job that I can be, right? And so putting a lot of pressure on myself to be good, to succeed, to get that recognition from my colleagues that I was visiting, that I did know what I was talking about, and getting comfortable with that so that they were coming to me for advice, that when they needed help. on a nutrition case, even though I'm not a nutritionist, but I can talk about the different diets that this company has. And so, but just going through that, and that I was a source of knowledge for them, and also just good customer service, right? As well. If they had a problem, I'm going to take care of it for you. Things like that. So just, I had to have that recognition for sure.
I'm sorry. It makes me a little sad that, again, it was I struggle with this. Maybe this is why it's hitting so close to home. It's like having to make up for them seeing it as not as good. So it makes us feel like we have to work harder. Did you ever feel like you were almost working just as hard, just in a different capacity, or?
Definitely. Well, I would say that it wasn't me that pointed it out. It's the people around you that point it out. So like my husband, right? You've got to shut off. At the end of the day, you've got to shut off. And so, how we all took surgeries home with us, and, and we would drift off and think about it, and maybe our spouse or, our partner wouldn't know. But I'd have my computer out and things like that. So, and I still really focus on that to this day, is that when my son comes home, which now he's super busy, so it's usually at 6:00, which then I work a little bit later. But as soon as he comes home, I try to, unless I have really something, which that happens all the time, it happens not all the time, but it happens occasionally where I have to work at night. But usually as soon as my son comes home, it's closed, right? And it's family time until I go to bed. So yeah, it wasn't me that pointed it out, but definitely those around me. And so really having to take that in and listen and say, yeah, I need to be here for you too. So not just as that mother to take care of, but just to be part of the family. So really important to do that.
Goodness, that support system, we need it, don't we?
Yeah.
So you actually, you got another opportunity as well. After Hills, you became a director of nursing.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
Yeah. So this was one of those things that, I wasn't, and it seems like the last few transitions I had, I wasn't really looking for a role, but I was open. And I was visiting Purdue and meeting with the current director of the veterinary technician program. And she told me she was leaving. And I'm like, So I can't remember if I asked her that minute or if I just sent an email that evening that said, okay, I'm really interested. And then, I got the application information and things. And so it went through the process of interviews and actually getting it, which that was a surprise that I got it as well, not being in academia, not having that background and things. So thrilled to get it. But it was one of those that I never saw myself doing that. But seemed really interesting and had that spark as soon as I heard it, right? That feeling that you get of, I might like to do this. So, listening to that and acting on it and got it. So,
yeah. So what did it entail and what were some of the things you learned and experienced being in that role?
So that was a really fun role. Of course, one of the biggest draws for that role was the people, because I am an alum of Purdue, and a lot of the same people when I was a student are still there, still affiliated with the program on the veterinary side as well as the veterinary technician side. A lot of the draw was learning I consider all veterinarians teachers, or, we always have to educate. There's always that role there, but really getting into the science behind teaching and, pedagogy and things like that. And so there was that aspect that Purdue gave me, working with students, which is always fun to see them come in from, they're 17, 18-year-old incoming freshmen, and then working their way through to really, really competent veterinary technicians and veterinary nurses. And I always valued the technician and the nurse role, because I couldn't have done anything that I did from day one of practicing exotic animal medicine to being in the ER when I had never done some surgeries, floats, and things like that before, and I had to rely on my technicians to talk me through things. So it was always a role that I really was passionate about. So, if you put all of that together, it was a completely new challenge. Definitely was super excited that I was trusted to get a role like that. But then also those, do I fit here type of things? Can I do this? All those types of things creep in. But yeah, overall, it was a great thing. And then also too, the veterinary technician and veterinary nurse role right now is changing so much. So being, an advocate and having to listen to, there's arguments going on both sides within the profession itself, and trying to understand and listen to both sides of the roles on technician versus nurse. And, if you look at the credentialing versus a mid-service or mid-level service provider and things like that, and just being able to be part of that, understand, listen, and hear so that I can learn as well was another great, I would say, just great part of it as this profession tends to rapidly change.
So what are some of the things you're most excited about when it comes to veterinary technician of the future?
Oh, geez. And that's where I have to be cautious because I don't know. Because of you do have both sides within the profession itself, but I think it's just going to continue to grow. I think the demand is definitely there. We have to address things like being a mother, though. That's one in childcare demands, salary demands, credentialing on a state level, and also some national levels. And then the consideration of a mid-level role and if that's going to happen or not. I think all of those, there is so much there that in the next 5 to 10 years, it's really going to be, I think we're going to have those answers that we've been waiting for and how we're going to work better along with them as a veterinarian in practice. And then also in industry, because there's some great roles for veterinary technicians and nurses within industry as well.
I'm excited about the future for sure. And now you're working with IDEXX, and you've got a lot of leadership roles and experience with what you do at IDEXX. So first, do you mind sharing a little bit about your role at IDEXX and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this was one of those roles that was not looking for a change at all. And then got a phone call that again got me excited when I heard about the opportunity. So I'm the director of global medical affairs, and I have 4 different teams, I guess, within my branch. We call them centers of excellence at IDEXX. And so the first team was really the reason why I joined IDEXX, because that's what existed when I joined. And that's leading the team of medical affairs specialists. So it's a team of generalists and specialists that work really closely with our partners within IDEXX, like the marketing team, research and development, the different lines of business that we have. So in-house diagnostics, reference lab diagnostics, and rapid assay. And they work with them closely as their subject matter expert, all the way from, an idea of a product being thought up to moving it through new product development phases and to go to market. And then they also work with the key opinion leaders, our specialists at the universities and also in general practice that, to get their thoughts and their views on new tests as they come out, and then offering clinical studies for us. So that in itself is a really fun role. And then we reorganized a couple of years ago now to also include a North American team, a European team, and then an Asia Pacific team. So I've got a global team now and they do those same roles, except for on a more local level with their regional marketing partners, and then also their sales team partners.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, goodness, communication is crucial no matter what, but especially when you're dealing with a global situation, even more so. I think that communication is so key. And you mentioned that you have a lot of passion around leadership skills and communication. So do you mind sharing a little bit about why you think they're so important?
Yeah. And I think the interest in communication really started when I was in emergency medicine, for sure, probably before that. But in emergency medicine, it was really hard for me to tell when I present an estimate to a client, and you'd either have a good response or a bad response, and knowing, well, what was the difference in the way that I presented this, that I had a bad response this time, and then also then how I reacted to it, replaying how I reacted to those conversations over and over again. And then going into those industry roles where you do need to create a need, and you're not necessarily on the sales, not a salesperson, but you're trying to drive a sale, trying to get somebody to buy a product, then those communication courses start becoming available. And so really gaining an interest there. Then when I started leading a team, same thing. You work with one person one way, and you do the same thing to another person and have a completely different outcome that you didn't expect. So that's when then those leadership and communication styles really started paying attention to that in my response as well during that time. So I really started taking a lot of communication courses, leadership courses, understanding my communication style, and trying to also understand the communication style of who I was talking to. And that has really gotten me to them through to where I am today, where you do have a global team. Now there's cultural competencies that I also have to put into play, and understanding where they're coming from culturally. But it's I think the biggest thing is that it's always a work in progress, and I can still present something to one person one way and it be perfect, and then present the same thing or have the same conversation with someone else and it completely go a different way. But I have different tactics now to really understand their point of view. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is knowing where you're coming from and knowing how you communicate. And then if things start getting difficult, knowing when you are not communicating well, and what your communication style is at that point. My natural tendency would be to get more defensive. And so really taking a step back and then asking more of those questions to understand those point of view, instead of getting defensive and coming to a conclusion right away, and being open to their point of view. So I think it's a combination of knowing where you are, and then also knowing where they're coming from, and really understanding so that you can get to that common point through communication. But it's always a work in progress.
I think that's definitely a good lesson, no matter what, is know that we're human and everything is a work in progress. So, as we kind of run out of time, I'd love to take your learnings on communication and trying to relate to others, and kind of come back full circle, because I feel like you've experienced a lot of different pivots and changes. And so what is like a final piece of advice you may give to other people who are really going through a lot of career pivots and changes, and might be struggling with trying to find that professional identity among all of that change? What would be a kind of an overall piece of advice you would give?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. One of the things and this isn't something that I've come to on my own, it was actually putting together the talk for VMX that you referenced again on professional identity. And I came across a quote, and I can't remember what the quote is, but basically, when you're having that unsettling feeling, when you're feeling insecure, when you're feeling like you just don't know where your future is going within a certain role, and not even within your professional life, family life, whatever it may be, there's going to be growth there. So, and you're going to come out of it stronger. You're going to learn something that makes you that stronger person, that then either makes you more successful in your current role or in your future. So that's really, and that's, if I look back, whenever I had those feelings of really being uncomfortable and, am I still a veterinarian? Heck yeah, I'm still a veterinarian, right? Now I can come back and say that. But it took a long time and learnings for me to get there and feel that, that with a strong voice that I can say that. And I may not have those clinical skills anymore, but I'm a really good communicator. I'll have that little doubt, or at least I try to be, right? But like I have other qualities, and I'm a good leader, and that's a different quality. So I could still go back to clinical practice tomorrow. I know I could. I know I'd have a long learning, a large steep learning curve to get there, but I bet I can talk to clients really well, when I get to that point. So it's a different strength. So yeah, just I think that's the biggest takeaway in a long version of it. But whenever you feel that, then you're going to grow.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Because I think no matter what, we're going to have change. We're going to have pivots. So I think that those are good things to keep in mind. So I have a final 4 questions for you. And the first one is, what is something people may get wrong about you?
What is something they may get wrong about me? That I'm an extrovert. I'm not. I'm an introvert. And so I can really turn it on for when I'm talking to people in a professional setting. But man, at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. And so I do like my quiet time. And if I'm getting really quiet, it's because I'm overloaded, right? So if I'm in meetings or it's just draining, it's usually just because I'm been surrounded all day. And so I just need to chill out for a little bit.
I can definitely relate to that for sure. The second question is, what is a hidden skill or interest you have?
Hidden skill or interest, that would be, I think, running, because I run really slow, and I don't know people, those of you that are have the cameras on. I do have a lot of medals behind me, so I love to run Disney races and themed types of races. There has to be something fun there. It can't just be running to run. I have to have that goal in mind to keep me going. But I do like to run. That's one of my hidden things.
I love the themes behind it. So do you have like a particular race that really stood out with like the theme or something?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to try to sign up for it again here in a few days, because on April 11th, anybody who wants to run the Dopey at Disney. So it's called the Dopey, and it's a 5K, a 10K, a half, and then a full. So it's the Dopey challenge. And so you run one of those each day. And then they usually pick a theme with your girlfriends that go, or whoever you go with, and dress alike and things. So that's a lot of fun.
Wow. I recently heard about that. So that's really cool. Very neat. The third question is, what is something that is on your bucket list?
On my bucket list is to travel more, for sure. And I don't have specific places that I really want to go to. I guess I do, like Europe and Australia for sure. Those would be anywhere in Europe, and then Australia. With a special needs daughter, it's really challenging to do that. So I've been brainstorming my way. It's about cruising around the world and things like that, like how I can get her on a boat. I think she'll be fine on a boat. So that's kind of on my bucket list, is to do some more travel.
And finally, what is something you are most grateful for?
That you said it would be family, and it is definitely for sure. I could not be here without my family, and I'll include my furry family members in there as well, because my pets mean a lot to me. So yeah, my family.
I had a feeling you'd come back and save me from all those lonely nights and heartbreaks. And I feel misplaced without you. Why don't